Hello, Squirrel Squad. Time for, I'm going to say little men, Joe's Boys. He's a judge. Come on, get out. He's a judge. He ate 9 last time. That's why he's so fat, added Josie with a withering glance at her cousin, who was thin as a lath. If I read this, muffins for tea, that's what they're talking about. I don't remember reading this. Hang on. And it could be that I read it and that's where my bookmark was. Take me down, Ned, please, Tom. Old Teddy's got my book and I will have it. So I think I remember that. Tom promptly collared the thief while Nan picked Josie from among the thorns and set her on her feet without I was studying my part in the willow. He came from the big wretched. Box your ears. Okay. I'm going to start here, and I may have read that. I guess I did, since I had my bookmark where I just started reading, but I'll go back and read this a little bit. The sound of applause from the piazza put a stop to these antics, and the young folks went up the avenue together, very much in the old style, when Tom drove 4 in hand, and Nan was the best horse in the team. Rosie, breathless and merry, they greeted the ladies and sat down on the steps to rest, Aunt Meg sewing up her daughter's rags, while Mrs. Joe smoothed the lion's mane and rescued the book. Daisy appeared in a moment to greet her friend, and all began to talk. Muffins for tea. Better stay and eat 'em. Daisies never fail, said Ted hospitably. And then here we go. He's a judge. He ate 9 last time. That's why he's so fat, added Josie with a withering glance at her cousin, who was as thin as a lath. I must go and see Lucy Dove. She has a willow, and it's time to lance it. I'll tea at college, answered Nan, feeling in her pocket to be sure. She has a whitlow, not a willow. Whitlow, and it's time to lance it. Feeling in her pocket to be sure she had not forgotten her case of instruments. Thanks, I'm going there also. Tom Merriweather has granulated lids, and I promised to touch them up for him. Save a doctor's fee and be good practice for me. I don't know what that is. I'm clumsy with my thumb, said Tom, bound to be near his idol while he could. Hush. Daisy doesn't like to hear your sawbones talk of your works. Hey, doctor talk. That's what they used to call Dr. Sawbones. Muffins suit us better, and Ted grinned sweetly with a view to future favors in the eating line. Any news of the Commodore? Asked Tom. He's on his way home, and Dan hopes to come soon. I long to see my boys together and have begged the wanderers to come to Thanksgiving, if not before, answered Mrs. Joe, beaming at the thought. They'll come, every man of them, if they can. Even Jack will risk losing $1 for the sake of one of our jolly old dinners, laughed Tom. There's the turkey fattening for the feast. I never chase him now, but feed him well, and he's swelling visibly. Bless his drumsticks, said Ted, pointing out the doomed fowl proudly parading in a neighboring field. If Nat goes the last of the month, we shall want a farewell frolic for him. I suppose the dear old chirper will come home a second Ole Bull, said Nan to her friend. A pretty color came into Daisy's cheek, and the folds of muslin on her breast rose and fell with a quick breath. But she answered placidly, Uncle Laurie says he has real talent, and after the training he will get abroad, he can command a good living there, though he may never be famous. Young people seldom turn out as anyone predicts, so it is of little use to expect anything, said Meg with a sigh. If our children are good and useful men and women, we shall be satisfied. Yet it's very natural to wish them to be brilliant and successful. They are like my chickens, mighty uncertain. Now that fine-looking cockerel of mine is the stupidest one of the lot, and the ugly-legged chap is the king of the yard. He's so smart, crows loud enough to wake the 7 sleepers, but the handsome one croaks and is no end a coward. I get snubbed, but you wait till I grow up and then see. And Ted looked so like his own long-legged pet that everyone laughed at his modest prediction. I want to see Dan settled somewhere. A rolling stone gathers no moss, and at 25, he is still roaming about the world without a tie to hold him. Except this, and Mrs. Meg nodded toward her sister, Dan will find his place at last, and experience is his best teacher. He is rough still, but each time he comes home I see a change for the better, and never lose my faith in him. He may never do anything great or get rich, but if the wild boy makes an honest man, I'm satisfied, said Mrs. Joe, who always defended the black sheep of her flock. That's right, Mother. Stand by Dan. He's worth a dozen Jacks and Neds bragging about money and trying to be swells. You see if he doesn't do something to be proud of and take the wind out of their sails, added Ted, whose love for his Danny was now strengthened by a boy's admiration for the bold, adventurous man. Hope so, I'm sure. He's just the fellow to do rash things and come to glory climbing the Matterhorn, taking a header into Niagara, or finding a big nugget. That's his way of sowing wild oats. And perhaps it's better than ours, said Tom thoughtfully, for he had gained a good deal of experience in that sort of agriculture since he became a medical student. Much better, said Mrs. Joe emphatically. I'd rather send my boys off to the world to see the world in that way than leave them alone in a city full of temptations with nothing to do but waste time, money, and health, as so many are left. Dan has to work his ways, and that teaches him courage, patience, and self-reliance. I don't worry about him as much as I do about George and Dolly at college. No more fit than 2 babies to take care of themselves. How about John? He's knocking round town as a newspaper man, reporting all sorts of things from sermons to prize fights, answered Tom, who that sort of life would be much more to his own taste than medical lectures and hospital wards. Demi has 3 safeguards: good principles, refined taste, and a wise mother. He won't come to harm, and these experiences will be useful to him when he begins to write, as I'm sure he will in time, began Mrs. Joe in her prophetic tone, for she was anxious to have some of her geese turn out swans. And I have to have a little sip of the Triple C cold coffee concoction, which is just strong coffee, a little flavored liquid creamer. I like the sweet Italian cream, and just a little bit of 1% milk. Stick it in here, and this locks. Put it in the freezer, and it gets slushy. It's like a coffee slushy. Yummy. Speak of Jenkins, and you'll hear the rustling of his paper, cried Tom, as a fresh-faced, brown-eyed young man came up the avenue, waving a newspaper over his head. Here's your Evening Tattler, latest edition. Awful murder. Bank clerk absconded. Powder mill explosion and great strike of the of the Latin schoolboys, roared Ted, going to meet his cousin with the graceful gait of a young giraffe. The Commodore is in and will cut his cable and run before the wind as soon as he can get off, called Demi with a nice derangement of nautical epithets as he came up smiling over his good news. Everyone talked together for a moment, and the paper passed from hand to hand, that each eye might rest on the pleasant fact that the Brenda from Hamburg was safe in port. He'll come lurching out by tomorrow with his usual collection of marine monsters and lively stories. I saw him jolly and terry and brown as a coffee berry, had a good run and hopes to be a second mate, as the other chap is laid up with a broken leg, added Demi. Wish I had the settling of it, said Nan to herself with a professional twist of her head. How's Franz? Asked Mrs. Joe. He's going to be married. There's news for you, the first of the flock, Auntie, so say goodbye to him. Her name is Ludmilla Hildegard Blumenthal. Good family, well off, pretty, and of course an angel. The dear old boy wants Uncle's consent, and then he will settle down to be a happy and honest burgher. Long life to him. And like one who lives in the burgs, I guess, Burgher. I'm glad to hear it. I do so like to settle my boys with a good wife and a nice little home. Now, if all is right, I shall feel as if Franz was off my mind, said Mrs. Joe, folding her hands contentedly, for she often felt like a distracted hen with a large brood of mixed chickens and ducks upon her hands. So do I, sighed Tom, with a sly glance at Nan. That's what a fella needs to keep him steady, and it's the duty of nice girls to marry as soon as possible, isn't it, Demi? If there are enough nice fellows to go around, the female population exceeds the male, especially in New England, which accounts for the high state of culture we are in, perhaps, answered John, who was leaning over his mother's chair, telling his day's experiences in a whisper. It's a merciful provision, my dears, for it takes 3 or 4 women to get each man into, through, and out of the world. You are costly creatures, boys, and it is well that mothers, sisters, wives, and daughters love their duty and do it so well, or you would perish off the face of the earth, said Mrs. Joe solemnly as she took up a basket filled with dilapidated hose, for the good professor was still hard on his socks, and his sons resembled him in that respect. Such being the case, there's plenty for the superfluous women to do in taking care of these helpless men and their families. I see that more clearly every day, and I'm very glad and grateful that my profession will make me a useful, happy, and independent spinster. Nan's emphasis on the last word caused Tom to groan and the rest to laugh. I take pride and solid satisfaction in you, Nan, and hope to see you very successful, for we do need just such helpful women in the world. I sometimes feel as if I miss my vocation and ought to have remained single, but my duty seemed to point this way, and I don't regret it, said Mrs. Joe, folding a large and very ragged blue sock to her bosom. Neither do I. What should I ever have done without my dearest mum? Added Ted with a a hug, which caused both to disappear behind the newspaper in which he had been mercifully absorbed for a few minutes. My darling boy, if you would wash your hands semi-occasionally, fond caresses would be less disastrous to my collar. Never mind my precious tassel head. Better grass stains and dirt than no cuddlings at all. And Mrs. Joe emerged from that brief eclipse looking much refreshed, though her back hair, not black, her back hair was caught in Ted's buttons and her collar under one ear. Here Josie, who'd been studying her part at the other end of the piazza, suddenly burst forth with a smothered shriek and gave Juliet's speech in the tomb so effectively that the boys applauded. Daisy shivered. Nan murmured, too much cerebral excitement for one of her age. I'm afraid you'll have to make up your mind to it, Meg. That child is a born actress. We never did anything so well, not even the witch's curse, said Mrs. Joe, casting a bouquet of many-colored socks at the feet of her flushed and panting niece when she fell gracefully upon the doormat. It is a sort of judgment upon me for my passion for the stage when a girl. Now I know how dear Marmee felt when I begged to be an actress. I never can consent. And yet I may be obliged to give up my wishes, hopes, and plans again. There was an accent of reproach in the mother's voice which made Demi pick up his sister with a gentle shake, and the stern command to drop that nonsense in public. Drop me, minion, or I'll give you the maniac bride with my best. Ha-ha! Cried Josie, staring at him like an offended kitten. Being set on her feet, she made a splendid curtsy, and dramatically proclaiming, Mrs. Woofington's carriage awaits, swept down the steps and round the corner, trailing Daisy's scarlet shawl magnificently behind her. Whew. Isn't she great fun? Isn't she great fun? I couldn't stop in this dull place if I hadn't that child to make it lively for me. If she turns prim, I'm off. So mind how you nip her in the bud, said Teddy, frowning at Demi, who was now writing out shorthand notes on the steps. You two are a team, and it takes a strong hand to drive you, but I rather like it. Josie ought to have been my child, and Rob yours, Meg. Then your house would have been all peace, and mine all bedlam. Now I must go and tell Laurie the news. Come with me, Meg. A little stroll will do us good. And sticking Ted's straw hat on her head, Mrs. Joe walked off with her sister, leaving Daisy to attend to the muffins, Ted to appease Josie, and Tom and Ned to give their respective patients a very bad quarter of an hour. That's all. Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called Parnassus. And I guess I'm saying that right. Yay! Finally got chapter 1 finished. What'd it take? 3 times? Have a great Christmas day. Hope to see you on Julie's Zoom or somewhere about. Bet there'll be lots of chats. I'm also coming on at 5. Got lots more Christmas trivia. And I've got some scrambled words too. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Hope Santa was good to you. And happy birthday to our Lord. Love you. Bye-bye.